Welcome to the final panel of the day on driving customer experience in the age of digital transformation. We have an incredible lineup of speakers from Tawuniya, Qiddiya, Red Sea Global, Neom, and Sasso, leaders who are shaping the future of customer experience across at least 4 different industries. Let's tackle the big questions of the day. How does one deliver a seamless, meaningful experience in the digital-first world? How do you balance innovation with the human touch? And what does it really feel like and takes to stay ahead of the ever-evolving customer expectations? Let's get ready for bold insights, practical strategies, and energizing discussion as we close out the day. And let me welcome our distinguished speakers on stage. Her Royal Highness Jawahar Al Saud, Executive Director of Customer Experience at Tawuniya. Welcome. James Kelly, Head of UX UI Design at Qiddiya. Yay! Badr Han, Director of Digital Platforms at Autonomous Neom, entrepreneur, the head of multiple startups as well. Engineer Obaid Namsham, Section Head of Consumers Experience at Sasso. Sarah Al-Malik, Lead AI and Special Projects at Red Sea Global. Welcome. Could I ask someone to click the next slide if possible? Thank you so much, Andrea. Well, we're going to divide the panel into several different sections. And as we talk about customer experience, inevitably, there's always a question of digital overload. So many organizations invest heavily in customer experience, yet customers report something that we call a fragmented experience. Aren't we confusing digital transformation with customer experience? And what should we do to help the technology serve more as a bridge rather than a barrier? Your Royal Highness, I would love for you to answer that question.
Thank you very much for having me today, and it's a pleasure to be with these panelists. I think we're mixing between digitization and customer experience. Digitization does not necessarily mean, it means a seamless process, but it doesn't mean a good experience. It doesn't translate into a good experience necessarily. We need to start by looking at the journey, fixing the journey. If you optimize a bad journey, it's not going to serve the customer any better. You also mentioned about having this balance between human and digital. When to have human, when to have digital. So digital is when customer is looking for effortless, is looking to get things done quickly. But in any transactions or journey touch points that are emotionally charged, you need a human to be there. So you need to make this balance. Otherwise, the customer is going to feel unseen, unheard, and its optimization is not going to serve the purpose. Finally, I would say, try to segment based on touch points as opposed to digital journeys. Yes. So basically, again, going back to the touch points that are emotionally charged, try to do your segmentation around these specific touch points with the customer. I think these are maybe the 3 main areas that I would focus on to make this balance.
I love the fact that you're mentioning the emotionally charged aspects of the game, because we can't fully do that with the help of technology. I liked the conversation we had earlier when you said quick transaction does not necessarily mean digital happiness or a happy customer. A quick transaction is a quick transaction. We don't know, and we need tools to be able to measure whether or not the customer is still very happy. So, Badr, how do you think we can bridge that gap? between the experiences that the organizations are creating versus the experiences that the customers are receiving with the technology?
First, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite with these esteemed panelists on the stage today. That's a really good question to start off with, right? And I think the aspect around empathy is, Her Royal Highness hit on that. The other two levers that I would add to that is digital experiences, native and not native experiences that you're talking about. It's not about optimization, but what is the job to be done? There's a really good book by Simon Sinek saying, start with the why.
Start with the why.
Start with the why. Why are you solving this problem? What touch point are you trying to solve? Because as humans, we're really trying to look at how is these interactions or the interfaces helping us to do things, and why are we doing it, right? So an interesting example is around fast food services, right? So fast food services, you're going through the drive-through, and you want your burger at the end of the day and have that meal, right? You're really not thinking about, standing in line, staying in the queue, paying the order, things like that. But there's physics that actually limit the production of the burger, right? In terms of, it has to be cooked, the meat has to be fully made before you can give it to the customer. If you break that experience and give the delivery of the burger faster than, the physics allow you to do, you give it to them fast, instant gratification, but at the end of the day, didn't walk away happy because that burger was half made, things like that. So what are you doing within the wait time? How do you enhance that experience as they're going, that feeling of moving forward while they're waiting for that burger, and then finally experiencing that happiness when you actually eat that burger,
Amazing.
Right? So that's kind of where I would.
So the fast transaction does not mean a happy customer, right? What do you do with that customer interim? In between the waiting times, do we create the right expectations? How do we communicate that? The way we have communicated that, do we know how is that received? So that's why these technologies are in place. Obaid, we had many conversations with you around customer experience, and you always come from a very kind of a conflicting perspective. Do we need technology? Do we not need technology?
We do need technologies, but from my short experience, I've worked in both the public and private sectors. There are questions that need to be answered before you start any endeavor regarding any digital transformation or digitalization, automation, whatever endeavor you're going to take on. The first and most important question is, who are your customers? And unfortunately, this sounds very basic, but I've seen this pitfall happening in so many businesses. Knowing well, there is no an organization without customers. Every single entity, whether public or private, has a customer. The customer is the reason for it to exist. So knowing exactly what your customer actually wants, and then stepping back into your own business inside and see what are the limitations, like the physical limitation, what are the emotionally charged touch points, and so on and so forth, and then utilize technology to solve those issues. One of the panelists today said something beautiful. I like it very much. I'm gonna steal it. So basically, he said solutions, not technical platforms or technologies. It's a solution. So if you deal with digital transformation and digitalization in that theme, let's say, I think you're going to succeed in transforming both your experience and the way you're conducting your business if you satisfy the customer's needs first.
Beautiful. And when it comes to solutions, the word solutions does not necessarily incorporate a technology or a human touch, which is why I wanted to kind of open up a little bit more about the human touch dilemma. So how do we actually find this blissful balance between the digital convenience and those emotionally charged touch points that we keep talking about? And I don't think there is a better experience than Qiddiya. You guys are the cornerstone of all of that excitement, which is around all of the water parks, all of the things and projects that you are going to bring. So as AI and automation grow, where should organizations draw the line between human interaction and digital self-service to make sure that we still give this authentic experience?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's a great question. So there was a touch on it, is technology what's needed? That's the question, and especially for the digital physical experience, especially going into the park, how
Yeah, just one button. You see technology, which is where the human touch, just gonna touch it now.
It's on.
It's fine. It's the human touch.
Yes. So,
touch on the great.
Again. Touch it again. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Just keep it in your hand. That's great. Thank you, James.
got a dodgy mic.
We have a solution. 2 agents. 2 agents are better than one.
Yes, there we go. That's better. Thank you.
Much better.
Yes, so I think a good point was made around technology and if it's needed and how it's needed and when. And going back to your point about the customer journey, that is where you should always start. You always look at the customer journey and ask why. Why does technology need to be involved? Where does it need to be involved? And how do we implement it to make it less friction as possible for the user? Because if your journey is not mapped out correctly and there's fragmentation, technology is just going to scale that fragmentation. And if you don't spend the time to get to know the user needs, then you're going to just cause more issues. And I think we've all been there when we've used a chatbot, and you get so frustrated with it because you just want to speak to a human and it keeps chucking you into the AI and just regurgitating what it's already said. And all you want to do is reach a human and have that human interaction and get your answer answered by a human. So understanding that and handing off to the human interaction when it's needed most is so important, and it should be designed as a first-class feature, because not only do you want to get them to the human at the right point, but you also want to give the human that's going to take over the context of what they was doing. So I can see you was doing X, Y, Z. This is how I can help you further. Instead of them having to repeat the whole issue that they've been going through. That's in terms of the chatbot. But in the physical journey, it's the same with like using a kiosk. Kiosks can also be quite hard work sometimes. It's about having the humans there to help, because technology doesn't always solve problems.
Absolutely. So we're balancing efficiency with empathy, right? And those are the 2 important components that we always need to consider. Sarah, there's nobody better than you when it comes to AI and special projects at Red Sea Global, and I feel like hospitality is best and unforgettable when it is unnoticed, but it takes a lot of brain power and a lot of technology to work the way you do. So in terms of balancing, what would be your take?
Yes, I think you made a few good points and I'd like to add to them. So from my perspective, I think that AI is becoming the trend and
Yes.
everyone's using it and introducing it in their organizations. And in a way, we should utilize AI to help support or enhance human potential rather than replace it. And from my perspective, so let's say, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you have a booking website and you as a customer, you're trying to make a booking. AI should be there to help support you, give you suggestions, or if you have questions, it can answer your questions, FAQs, or if you have a problem with your booking, it can give you basic responses. But when you have a bigger issue where you need the human touch, you need assurance, you need trust, that's when I think customers should be given the opportunity to switch from AI chatbots to talk to a human customer representative.
Yes.
To get that missing point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your Royal Highness, I couldn't but ask you, when it comes to the insurance end of the game, we do not have people shopping. We have people coming for specific claims. So how do we balance ethics, potentially trust, and all of those emotionally charged touch points to actually service them properly when they're filing a claim online?
Actually, we have a lot of talking about the claims journey specifically. It's end-to-end automated.
Yes.
And the purpose of that is that when you file a claim, you're looking for speed, you're looking for efficiency, you're looking for an effortless transaction. However, Our amazing team in mobility, this is about motor claims specifically. So they have realized that before a customer actually files a claim, there's this whole incident of having a car accident and uncertainty, and yes, this is an extremely emotionally charged moment. So they've added a human aspect. Now, if a customer, if Tawuniya customer has an accident, he will receive a call instantly from Tawuniya team. We are notified either through Drive application, which is a reward application that our customers can download, or through Neom. So we're notified that the customer had an accident. We will receive a call immediately from Tawuniya, asking them, making sure they're okay, asking them if they need an ambulance, if they need a car to pick up their car, basically. So everything that you need to sort for when the accident happens. If anyone's hurt, we will send an arrange for an ambulance to go. So we take care of that very first moment, and then you can just go to the application and file your claim seamlessly. So we made sure that the human touch happens at the very beginning, in that very intense moment, and then the digital journey will continue seamlessly for the part of the journey that actually needs that fast transaction. So I guess it's not about whether should we digitize or not. We should, but how much of the journey should we digitize?
Beautiful. And while you're talking about the digital journey, the journey with Tawuniya literally starts before the customer initiates that journey. So that proactive approach, determined by the technology, intervened by the human, and then we return back to the technology that finalizes the process for us, creates empathy, because the concerns are critical, and efficiency, because the rest is handled by the technology. Beautiful. What about ethics and customer trust, Badr? And this is an important question, because we've been talking about personalization, hyper-personalization. Customers do not dislike data, but they don't want to be treated like data. And if we want to hyper-personalize anything, we need to take some of that data away from them and action and course correct that experience. So what would you say are the cornerstones of maintaining that trust and privacy, especially in the Middle East?
So this is a really important question that we actually try to address every single day. And that journey actually started 3 years ago when we were saying, okay, well, we're going to create this city that's going to be hyper-personalized, or even journeys when you talk about Uber or any of those things. And Amr mentioned Waze and Google and how many people use that today, right? There's really two elements, right? One is, how are users understanding how their data is actually being leveraged, right? And what we thought about that is, today, users are actually outside of that data, right? So they're not part of that ecosystem, they're a provider, and then their other entities are benefiting from that data. But what if you flip the model and say, well, there's certain incentive networks that you do, right? So Tawuniya has Drive, which you say, well, look, if you provide this particular data, there are certain incentives that you can get, sort of rewards, discounts, gas cards, things like that, which it puts the user within that whole ecosystem of the data game, right? And then they're willingly looking at, okay, well, does this actually make sense from my perspective around giving my data up, right?
Absolutely.
Why
would you do that?
Exactly. And then the other element of it is service degradation, right? And we're talking about unlocking data and removing data silos and things like that, but that really creates a different issue, is you're creating another exposure and another threat vector for bad actors to be able to leverage that data, right? So what are the walls that you're setting up to say, well, you know, that data is authorized, so you start to create this data contract world is what we think about. And that data contract is monetization mechanism. Just the way you go to the store, your money actually has certain value, right? And so when you buy that apple or that burger, you're saying that dollar is paying me certain value. What is that data mechanism and incentivization mechanism to say, okay, you have this particular data point, here's the value that I'm receiving and a certain reward that I'm getting. Whether it's monetary, usability, humans look at it from very different directions. So that's kind of what we think about, and we build platforms that kind of help around those elements around data contracts.
Absolutely. So data is kind of like the new currency. So treat your customer data as currency. You guys give something away, this is what you get in the end or at the beginning, and just to be a little bit more transparent with them around that. Beautiful, beautiful. Obaid, speaking about CX and returns on investment. Tricky question. So many customer experience initiatives, unfortunately, do not show or fail to show that measurable impact. Are organizations truly driving value for customers, or is customer experience, the way we receive it, is just a buzzword? And how does digital transformation directly affect the customers?
One thing came up to mind immediately, but I see it in the next slide, is working inside us. So this is one of the biggest issues that affect measuring accurately the impact of your customer experience initiatives on your business. Generally speaking, there are the basics, and I always go back to basics. You have a couple of initiatives, you have a strategy, a vision, and a mission, and you go conduct it, and then you measure, go back and see the impact of it. But the biggest challenge I've noticed during my experience is that either there are multiple initiatives tackling the same issue, or there are let's say, the different levels of priority that deprioritize the impact on customer experience. I've witnessed so many projects that claim to be a customer experience project, but it's basically automation of a service. So when you go and after that project is delivered and you go measure it and looking for the customer experience initiative ROI, you're not going to find it. It's an automation project. So having the clear and objective for the initiatives to begin with will definitely affect the way you're going to gauge the return on investment, having the right metrics, having the right tools to track. Most of my experience have been with Excel and PowerPoint, but when we have the right tools, then you can actually accurately measure the traffic, you can measure the impact, you can measure the sentiments of the customers, you can so on and so forth. So having clear goals and having clear metrics
is important.
Yeah.
And I'm super happy that you're bringing out the definitions such as automation. So it's faster transaction, or it's automation, it's faster speed of the application, the turnaround, not the customer experience. So let's measure correct things.
Yeah, by the way, I love the way that Tawuniya dealt with both the digitalization or automating a service and addressing the human side of the experience. So by being proactively showing empathy to the customer, you don't need to, let's say, heavily constrain the digital transformation of the service itself. So they chose both tracks at the same time, so I really like it.
Absolutely, and with your Royal Highness, we had a lovely preparation session where something very unconventional was announced, and you said, why are we looking at the returns on investment in terms of money? We don't need to look at that in terms of money. That could be another currency. Is the customer happy? Is he satisfied? Is the service faster? So what would be your take on measuring the customer efficiency versus ROI?
Actually, you can, so you have two aspects. You have your customer experience aspect, and then you have your financial. Being working in a financial industry, looking at your financial returns is extremely important. And I think the key is to have the metrics where you're linking your customer satisfaction metrics, whether it's NPS or CSAT, to your financials, basically, to be able to, you want to know, there's, for example, the customer lifetime value. This is a metric that connects both financials and customer experience. You can look at the share of wallet, the retention, the multiple things. It depends on how the company wants to look at it, or the organization. You need to understand as a company so you have promoters, you have detractors. Turning your detractors into promoters, how much is it going to cost you versus how much is it going to bring back? You're investing in expanding in a certain customer segment or enhancing their experience. It's going to cost you to do that. What's the return on investment in offering additional services for this specific customer group, or expanding within that? For example, let's say we want to expand in the SME segment. you need to understand, is it worth the investment? So there's a certain level of quality of services that you're going to provide to all your customers. That's basically, this is your brand, this is what you're putting out there. But if you're going to go above and beyond, you need to know how much are you going to spend versus how much is it going to bring you back. And there are metrics that you can actually, it requires a lot of data, and it requires that the organization is mature in its data collection and analytics and ability to predict certain aspects. But if you have this data available, then you can introduce these metrics to be able to actually quantify the impact of your customer experience initiatives in financial terms.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're taking a very proactive approach. Before we do something, let's calculate what is the cost of doing that. Maybe the status quo is cheaper and I should address other initiatives that are more meaningful in a short term or in a long term. So just to be very pragmatic and calculated about that. As we're nearing the end of the session, I believe the last question of the day is about breaking the silos. Everyone talks about silos as something very fragmented, that they have to be broken, that everyone needs to work cohesively, look at the universal source of truth. But then with you, we had a very interesting discussion about those silos. So should we deliver fragmented experience? Should we break the silos? Are there silos that should never be broken and not be touched, and why?
No, so thanks for that question. And I'm just going to give a big shout out to the Kingdom with their Vision 2030 around transactions and going that seamless ability to kind of just pay as you do in the transactions, right? So when I was back in New York like a year ago, I was fumbling with cash and saying, okay, well, you don't have a machine and things like that. So big shout out for the Kingdom on breaking those kind of silos, right?
Yes.
But there's other silos that you need to kind of ensure that you keep intact, right? So I was talking to a bank, and they were saying, look, we want to have these different interactions and give better customer experiences, but also ensure that we're protecting our customers and our employees, right? We don't want necessarily HR to start sharing data around what they have around employees with finance, for example, right? And so our AI is not about centralizing and bringing these capabilities together, but it's really what are the type of data that is relevant to do that task, and can that orchestration layer be set without having to kind of go in and manually say, this data is approved, this data is not approved, that's just archaic, old-time thinking of doing things, right? So there is a need for decentralization around certain data assets and data capability,
Yes.
but there is also a need for what is the metadata and the information, what I call not the data point, but the information that needs to be used to make decisions.
Absolutely.
And how do you bring that up? And can you use AI agents to be able to do that? What's the vetting process? Do you put in the right frameworks and things like that? That's kind of where things need to go. It's about protection, but at the same time, enablement when it comes to information.
Absolutely. So some silos are there by default. They are designed to be there. Let's be very careful about breaking them out.
100%.
When it comes to special projects, Sarah, when it comes to data and AI, what would be your take on siloed interactions and CX in that matter?
Yeah, so let's take a look at this from a different perspective. So what does the customer usually see the end product, the application website, but they don't know what goes on behind the scenes within a single organization. So it's every department working in silo. Everyone thinks that they are the ones that understand the most. No one else understands what's happening, let's say marketing or operations. But in reality, they're all working towards the same end goal, towards the same achievements, towards the same KPI. So I think to break those silos, maybe introduce a KPI for all departments to work towards, or even hiring a leader with a diverse background who understands multiple fields like marketing, operations, technology, and so forth. Those are the type of leaders that can ensure that everyone's working together, ensuring cross-functional collaboration and delivery on time.
The power influencers, right? People that do not come from a technology background, they come from various different diverse avenues of life who can put all of that together and understand the velocity of that. James, speaking about silos in cross-departmental construct.
Yes, that was a very good point. I'm just going to build on that, to be honest. I think you don't see it as much in startups, but in large organisations, there's always teams working in silo. And to your point, they always I think they're focusing on their goal, but they're really working all towards the same goal. And part of bringing these teams together, a good exercise would be to, when you're doing the customer journey mapping, you build a journey squad that are going to come from individual teams, representative from each team, come together, get to a workshop, map out the journey together, then they all understand where their team fits into that journey. And that brings them together, and then setting up regular follow-ups basically and workshops and making sure that you're always aligned towards that common goal.
Absolutely. So every time we talk about technology, breaking the technological silos, those are the people. This is a technology squad, which is actually humans that would change the game together. Your Royal Highness, I suppose you can close the session with answering that question when it comes to siloed interactions in CX.
Yeah. To my colleagues' points, basically, yes, I think we're facing this in our organization as well. We've done a pilot though. We had a journey that was not doing very well last year, and we actually did develop the journey squad, and it was led by the journey owner, and everyone else involved in that journey was there. T&D, finance, customer care, everybody was there. Who impacts this journey? And they had a shared KPI, and they had a task to work on improving this journey, and we wanted the measurement for it was the customer CSAT, basically. Mm-hmm. It took them around, I think after 9 months, because it involved a lot of technology, a lot of digital work on the app and the website. A lot of part of this journey is digital, in addition to, of course, having the right communication in place, the relationship manager and so on. After 6 months, their CSAT improved by 1.5 points. And this was a journey that was difficult to nudge for over a year. So, and we did this pilot, and the plan was to scale it up if we actually see results, and now this is going to be part of our new operating model.
Amazing, amazing.
If I may add,
Absolutely.
I know we're short on time, but from a practical perspective, I can just summarize the points. So basically, you have a common goal with the different teams, and it doesn't matter how professional you are, you need to take in consideration the human interest. So sharing the credit, it's very important. So every part of the team should know exactly what is the part of the success story that they're writing, that they're accredited with. I know it sounds, a little bit unprofessional, but it's true. You need to take in consideration the human aspect, the human desires, the aspiration to succeed, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. It's important to know your customer, not only from the standpoint of what does he want to achieve with my application, but what does he want to be as a human, right? And everyone strives for success. Thank you, everybody, so much for the work that you're doing, for coming over here, for joining us in this panel, and for sharing your invaluable experience. Thanks again to everybody for the trust you yield to Contentsquare. We will focus on value, not on vanity, and let us measure together what really matters. Change cannot happen without you. Our CEO likes to say, where change happens, you are the way. So thank you.